Planet Earth, a planet awash with water. Great oceans cover more than 2/3 of the Earth's surface. We can't live in the oceans, but there's a fantastic variety of plants and animals which can. In water shallow enough for light to penetrate, seaweeds wave and grow. As on land, plants need sunlight to produce their food. Swimming through the open water in search of their food are some of the animals of the sea. Fish. Some hunt in shoals. Others prefer to hunt alone. Not all fish need to swim for their food. This one's well camouflaged and can sit on the seabed waiting for a bite. One of the sea's most skillful hunters, the cuttlefish. It has sharp eyes and a frill helps it move with great precision, forwards and backwards. There are other animals that live on the seabed. A crevice makes an ideal hideout for a lobster, if one can only shift this sand away. The seabed's home for a variety of starfish, and their close relation, the sea urchin. There are some animals down here that look more like plants, such as these anemones. They usually live in shallow waters and can be very beautiful and colourful. These animals can't move around and must rely on the swirling water to bring them their food. Food eaten by many other sea creatures, including the basking shark. Cruising slowly near the surface with an open mouth, it sifts through thousands of tons of seawater every hour. But what exactly are these animals feeding on? Whatever it is must be very small. To find out, we need to sample the seawater for ourselves. For this, scientists use a collecting jar tied to a specially shaped net.
Right, that's the collecting jars on the end there. And of course the device itself is cone-shaped so that as it's dragged behind, it gets a sample of sea inside it. This is a very fine mesh nylon, which should make anything that's in the water go right back into the bottle. We're not likely to catch any herrings, but small stuff, I hope. Okay, Harry, slow ahead.
The net has to be towed slowly just beneath the surface of the water. That's where the shark was feeding.
Well, we've trawled it for nearly a quarter of an hour, and we've certainly concentrated a lot of sea into this bottle now. You can certainly see there's life, or there's something there, but to look at it closely, we really need to take a drop of it out and put it under the microscope.
To get our first glimpse of what's in the jar, we'll put just a couple of drops of water under the microscope. It's one that magnifies 20 times. Straight away, you can see things drifting about. But to see any detail, we need to take a much closer look. These are the strange and weird shapes of tiny animals. They're minute. Most are smaller than a pin's head. These animals drift in the surface currents of the sea. They're called plankton. Some of these tiny animals are the infant stage or larvae of much larger creatures. This is a very young crab. As it grows, it becomes heavier. Eventually, it sinks from the surface to spend its adult life on the seabed. And this is the larva of one of the crab's relatives. It's a baby lobster. In due course, it too will grow and sink to the seabed where it lives as an adult. Here's another tiny planktonic animal. This one grows to become a flatworm. See if you can guess what this little creature becomes. It starts by developing what will eventually be tentacles. Would you believe? A starfish. Among the plankton, there's the larvae of one particular kind of sea animal that's really quite easy to recognize. They're the larvae of various types of sea snails. But it's not only the infant stages of animals like these that drift among the tiny creatures near the surface. There are also plants. They too are part of what we call plankton. These plants are by far the largest, but such a size is very rare. Most are so small you need a microscope to see them. Most of these plants are no bigger than the point of a needle, but what they may lack in size, they make up for in number. There may be 750,000 in just 1 cubic meter of seawater. And they're plants that often move in very curious ways. Again, these plants need the energy of sunlight to make their food. That means they can only live at the surface. It's a part of the sea rich in plant and animal life. The most important plankton are the plants. They provide the food on which all life in the sea depends. Feeding off these plants are tiny animals like copepods. They use their legs to keep this rich planktonic soup on the move. As they do, they sieve the plants from the water. Also feeding on these plants are baby shrimps. But shrimps themselves are food for the sea gooseberry, a creature that's quite transparent. You can see the eyes of a shrimp inside the stomach of this one. Young crabs too have a liking for baby shrimps. But in turn, the young crabs are eaten by larger animals, a baby flatfish with a crab in its stomach. To keep afloat, this flatfish has a tiny air sac in its body. It's that black ball on the left. Keeping afloat is very important for this animal's survival. The only supply of food is near the surface of the sea. Here's another animal that keeps afloat with the help of a built-in air sac. Many of the planktonic animals would sink from the surface without some means of support. This strange little creature is kept up by a long spine. The spine also provides some protection against being eaten. The spines of this baby crab serve the same purpose. The spines on this creature are only for protection. A strange rocking movement helps keep it at the surface. Other planktonic animals have different ways of moving about. Some, like this sea butterfly, flap. But the most common way is the use of tiny hairs, which seem to work like oars. But while these hairs help this animal to move about in search of food, they're not always enough to help it escape from being eaten. This little creature, a villager, has other means of escape, as a scientist once wrote. The villagers are lively tar, the liveliest afloat. A whirling wheel on either side propels his little boat. But when the danger signal warns his bustling submarine, he stops the engine, shuts the port, and drops below unseen. But down below may be the groping arms of barnacles. They feed on plankton, sieving them from the moving water. These barnacles have settled on the outside of a group of mussels, which themselves are busy filtering plankton from the soup. Plankton is also the food of the tiny animals inside this piece of coral. From inside a flexible skeleton, the animals stretch out tentacles to catch whatever may be passing by. Many animals in the sea feed on plankton. Some must wait for whatever drifts by. Others are free to hunt for the plankton of their choice. Fish that swim in shoals usually eat a whole variety of food, including growing shrimps. The leftovers are always welcomed by the anemones below. With enticing tentacles that can sting, they're also able to feed on quite large living animals. But they're no match for this hungry creature. It's a sea slug, scientifically named, believe it or not, Doris. As the slug approaches, the anemone gets ready to use its vicious stings contained in the tip of each waving tentacle. Although deadly to small fish, the slug is immune and can munch away stings and all without suffering any harm. In response to being eaten, the anemone attempts to defend itself, but in a way that can only really be seen if we speed up the film. Just as on the surface of the sea, the animals down here feed upon each other. An exhausted anemone, but a satisfied slug. Sniffing for the scent of a possible meal are some of the scavengers of the sea. These are dog whelks. They bury themselves for safety, only emerging when dinner is at hand. Dog whelks have a liking for dead and rotting fish, fish that once depended on plankton for their food. And there are always other scavengers ready to grab any bits of fish that might get carried away in the current, like the bristle stars. These pieces of food are caught in the loop of a tentacle and passed down to the central mouth. When there's plenty of food about, a bristle star will stuff itself full, almost to bursting point. Many creatures, like starfish, have to hunt for their food. Starfish feed on certain shellfish, like the queen scallop, whose shell it tries to prize apart. But the queen scallop has a means of escape. Other shellfish are not so lucky. Despite their protective shells, these mussels are being eaten by fish with horny lips and strong teeth, which break open the protective shells with no trouble at all. Even the protective spines of sea urchins don't always work. Catfish are well equipped to deal with sea urchins. They too have horny mouths and crushing teeth. Even the hard outside skeleton of the crab is no protection against one animal, the cuttlefish. Using its ability to move about, the cuttlefish gets into a position from which it can pounce on its prey from behind. Held in a powerful grip, the crab will thrash harmlessly until eventually it dies. Still patiently waiting for a bite is this anglerfish. A special rod waving just above its head lures its prey, smaller fish. Once near enough, that'll be the end of that. Seals, too, eat fish. Their shape is designed to move them quickly through the water in their hunt for prey. Seals are at the top of a long food chain, a chain which began with the plankton drifting on the surface of the sea. Shoals of certain fish are also food for the humpback whale, another animal at the top of the food chain. As it hunts just below the surface, the sea seems to boil with fish. That's because it's using a special fishing technique. By blowing bubbles around the fish, the whale is able to concentrate the shoal. Then it lunges up into the fish, gulping great mouthfuls as it goes. As its jaws close, the water's forced out through a filter, leaving the fish in the whale's mouth ready to be swallowed. Also sharing the top of the ocean food chain are many seabirds. These are gannets. They're a large bird with a powerful beak. They plunge dive straight into the water in their hunt for food, plucking out herring and mackerel. Different birds eat different fish. These puffins hunt and eat sand eels. These are all nature's hunters. But there's one more hunter in the sea. The fisherman. Today, fishing trawlers use all the aids modern technology can provide. From his wheelhouse, the skipper has electronic eyes to watch the sea. A special sensor on the ship's bottom scans under him, and another sensor on part of the trawl net signals back its position in the water. By careful adjustments, he can vary the depth of the trawl. When a shoal of fish comes along, he knows how deep it is, and he's enough time to adjust the trawl so that the entire shoal is trapped. And once they're in the bag, the giant net is hauled aboard. This is only the first of many batches to be brought up. It's very efficient hunting, but nature will probably recover. If we become too greedy, nature may not be able to cope. And that would be of concern to us all.